Today, we're having a look at a topic that many people shy away from, and that topic's death. How often do you find conversations about death, about dying? Often it's when somebody has passed, it's in the aftermath of losing somebody, but it's not in the preparation, it's not in the before, it's not in the getting ready for. So I'm delighted today to introduce Kim Harms to you, all the way from the other side of the, well, not quite the other side of the world, but the US. They're a long way away from me. Welcome, Kim, today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you, Angela. I'm looking forward to talking to you as well.
Well, you've got such an interesting story and a passion, and obviously we've had a bit of a chat. But first of all, just I suppose I'm going to ask you the question directly, really. Why talk about death now when you're so much alive?
Well, my husband passed away. I lost a husband, I lost my son. I also lost my mother and son both to suicide, then my husband to a broken heart. So I've had a lot of loss in my life, as you do when you're 68 years old. Many of us have suffered losses. The longer you live, the more losses you suffer, right? That's just how life is, unfortunately. But when my husband died, I found myself in a very strange place because I had been taking care of him for a long time. We'd been married since I was 19. I found myself alone all of a sudden as a widow. And I realized I was in that really strange land between menopause and death. That was where I found myself. And I thought, what the heck? How do I get how do what do I do to get ready? What do I do to prepare for this next phase of life? Because we prepare for life in phases. We go to school, we graduate, we get our jobs, we want to retire, then we retire, and then it's like, oh, now what, right? So I spent that time. He died 4 years ago, and I've written a couple of books for widows, but I spent that time researching to try to figure out kind of an instruction book for how to manage our fourth quarter of life. And of course, I know I'm in my fourth quarter because I'm 68, but you might be 28 and you could still be in your fourth quarter. You just don't know, right? So we don't know when we're going to die, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come within the next 20 years or so. So I just did a lot of research, which was fascinating research. I even became a death doula, and I wrote a book, and I wrote a book with the idea that I want this concept to be a final gift of love to my children, because it's easy to ignore death and just hope that they're going to take care of it later. But what we find, at least in the US, is that almost 60% of families have some sort of conflict involved around a death, because maybe some members of the family might not like how you manage end of life decisions. Do you go to hospice? Do you go to a hospital? There might be some concern about that. There might be some concern about how the assets were divided up or how things are happening. And I have two wonderful daughters, six precious grandchildren, two son-in-laws, and I want to make sure that when I die, that they know they were loved, and I did everything I can to make sure that the process was as easy as possible. And I recommend putting everything in a 3-ring binder with page protectors. And I have that all done. And it has everything you need to know when I'm gone, including titles to the car, real estate, my healthcare directive, wills and trusts, and all of that sort of thing, passwords, all the documents, all the people they need to be able to contact, who takes care of the dog. I don't have one, but for people that have dogs, who takes care of the dog, all of that information in one spot. But also, and this is very important, letters of love to them, so that as they're going through, they're going to be mourning. It's a tough time anyway. As they're going through this document, they're going to see that I love them so much that I took the time to put it together. And then I wrote love letters to all of them, little final Valentines to my whole family, so they remember how much their mother or their grandmother or their mother-in-law loved them. And I think that's something we can do to help that next generation have that softer landing and become more resilient. I think we can help them do that. And again, it's one of the most important gifts of love we can give them.
Absolutely. I think I remember when my brother died, just having certain things, letters he'd written to me, message he'd sent on the phone, just those things where he had said what he thought and how he loved me and how proud he was of me or whatever. That so precious then, so precious now. You know, it leaves a sort of legacy of the good memories. And of course, it's not always going to have been good memories, but the thing is, we want to leave, we need those things to hold on to. So my sister, sadly, she took her own life like your son, and it was a big shock. It took longer to access those happy memories, but they are there. They are there, and it gives you a strength. It gives you a strength that you probably don't realize you have. So your idea of actually purposefully doing it, so your children are not going to have to go looking for things that you wrote, because right there in front of them at that time, when they've said goodbye to you, they're going to be able to open something special and precious that you wrote for them. So I just think that's such a positive idea. So what else is in the book? Tell us a little bit more about the beginning of the book.
Well, at the beginning of the book, we many times think of legacy as the money that we leave or property, but really the most important legacies we leave are our interactions with others. And of course, I believe the most important legacy is love. I had a mother for only 6 years, really, and she left the best legacy of love to me she could in just those 6 years. So I talk about legacies like love, resilience, laughter. It's good. Laughter is a big legacy to be able to laugh at ourselves. Most importantly, that's a big one. Art is a legacy in which can last forever. So I have about 15 legacies that are listed. And what I found, Angela, is that over my life, over the 68 years I've been alive, I've come in contact with some amazing people that nobody really ever knew about. I have a Holocaust survivor in there who was just a baby when the Holocaust occurred and was, hidden in a work camp and lost, family members. And then I have the Rwanda genocide survivors who rebuilt their country because they wanted to make sure that if they had to forgive and reconcile to ensure that their children could grow up in a safe, healthy country, and they have. It's a successful example. People, just normal people that have leaving legacies of hard work and teaching people how to work hard and loving them and showing them specific skills. Art is one of them. So I have lots and lots of legacies. The first third of the book talks about 15 different legacies. Legacy of a friendship. I've been very fortunate to have friends, and how important that is to keep friends, especially as you get older, because as I get a little older, things change. Your brain doesn't quite work like it used to, and it's really fun to be around other people whose brains are also not working, because then you feel normal. So keeping those friends together is so critically important. The second part of the book, I talk about death and dying. I became a death doula, but I talk about it in a, like, what do people think about death? What do different religions believe? I keep it in upbeat as much as possible and talk about death being more of a gentle reaper than a grim reaper. And then that last third of the book is a workbook with everything you need to know before you go enlist for your family.
So there's a lot of practical, sort of thought-provoking as well, sort of information, but also helping people to perhaps acknowledge a side of life that many people try to hide from.
Yes. Yeah, we are, I'm in the US. We are definitely a death denying culture. We do everything we can to keep healthy, which is great because the longer you live, the more legacy you can provide. So that's a good thing. But we seem to keep trying to live as if we're not ever going to die. And we don't like to admit that we're going to die. And some of the saddest circumstances I've come across are people that are in a terminal phase of their lives, but they're afraid to get these documents done, and their family is afraid to ask for these documents because they don't want to admit that they are going to die. They feel like they're betraying them. So that's why it's so important to just to get it done. Get it done before you have a terminal illness. If you do have a terminal illness, get it done too. But let's try to get it done beforehand so that if that time were to happen, if that time were to come, you are ready. You got it. You got it all there. You got it all together. One less thing to worry about before you go. I was in a meeting, and we were getting into a boat, a small boat kind of on the ocean with some young man driving it. It was very full and it was choppy, and people were laughing like very nervously, like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And I had given a seminar about, this topic. And I just said, you know what, guys, I'm ready. So somehow I got my book together. So I'm ready. You guys got to get ready because you just never know what's going to happen. And you can just make some fun with it. You can have fun with this, which is what I like to do.
I think if you look back down the ages, we were talking about history before, and here in the UK, and it may have been different where you were, but death was very much part of life. It was part and parcel of the everyday. The children weren't scared of it in the same way. And when I lost my sister and brother very close together, my youngest son was only 6 at the time. And there's quite a big gap between oldest and youngest. And he just got It was just natural. It was natural. He saw pain, he saw grief, and he also contributed to love and healing. And he would just tap my shoulder with his big next brother up, and there would be a cup of tea for me because they'd know what I was going through. But it just became natural. And so I went to a funeral last week. He came with me. You know, he's asking those questions, Mum. What would you like at your funeral? How would you like it to be done? And he's not scared. And because he was doing that when I was full of life, it was a great conversation to have. You think, well, actually, what would be my favorite hymns to have and so on? It doesn't feel weird. But I know he said that to other people and they have felt, he's only 24, why is he asking? Why is he talking about those things? But from what you're sharing, and if you're watching this, ask yourselves, from what you're sharing, Kim, we should be treating death very much as part of life.
Yes, as a graduation, it's kind of a graduation event. Just like we prepare for a graduation, we need to get all of our stuff together, get all our requirements done so that we can sit back and say, we got it going.
So what would you say for somebody who perhaps is scared of dying? What would be the best way for them to start preparing in this sort of way and to think perhaps of their family that they'll be leaving behind?
Well, I think that when you take a look at death and fear of death, it's now having lost so many people, I'm no longer at all afraid of death. I'm kind of looking forward. I'm not looking forward to it anytime soon, but as a time when I will be able to see my husband and my son and my mother again, I want to stick around for my grandchildren as long as possible. But I'm not afraid of it, and it's freeing to eliminate that fear. But many people are afraid of death, and I think one of the things that was helpful for me as I was researching this is to really go and do some research on near-death experiences, for instance, which is something that has been documented in Europe, documented in the United States. Take a look at what happens when people die typically, whether you believe that it is a true death experience or if it's something that your brain goes through or whatever it is. If you take a look, I'm fully in the court of, I think, we're going to go to heaven, everything's going to be great. But not everybody believes that. But no matter what you believe, if you take a look at the research on what happens when people die or feel that they're become close to death, you'll find that typically it is a very calming experience. It is a kind of a positive experience. If you really take a look and research what happens around that time, it's typically not a scary thing. And one of the things that I think is so wonderful that I had for my husband is, and it was started in Great Britain, thank you very much, is a hospice movement. My husband was in hospice, and what a beautiful time that was. He said he did not want to go into a hospital. He did not want to be on a ventilator. He wanted to die at home. And so it was a beautiful transition for him. And he just took one deep breath and was gone. In fact, he kind of died twice, actually. He was not breathing and had no heartbeat for 20 minutes and then came back, and which happened to be my son's birthday. So we had a birthday party. We had a party for my husband, kind of a going away party for my husband on my son's birthday. And he passed away very gently the next day, just kind of poof, he was gone. So death does not have to be something to be feared. And I think many times people fear like the process of dying. And because we have that wonderful hospice movement, we have become very good at making death a very peaceful progress. We take care of the pain and suffering that would normally be present around death through the hospice movement. So we become very good at making death as gentle as possible.
Yeah, I think that is so true. I think there are people there. I mean, you talked about being a death doula. There are people, thankfully, they're willing to be there. They're willing to stand in that place and support families so that you don't have to be alone. Because often it is, like you say, it's the fear of dying, often rather than the actual fear of death for some people. I think what you're doing here, you're bringing it out into the sort of public view, into discussion places, and into looking at things in a positive light. So if you're watching this, and you might be someone who is wary, perhaps your experiences of death in the past have not been peaceful at all. Perhaps there's been trauma involved in it. And that's something, that you don't want to sit on. So what about somebody like this, Kim, somebody who has maybe been involved in a traumatic death in some way with the parent, and so what they're carrying is a pain that they don't know what to do with? What would be a best thing for them to do?
would suggest that they go take a look, read some books. And actually, as a 68-year-old, it's hard for me to admit this, but YouTube has got some amazing videos. The University of Virginia has got a whole department that studies death and near-death experiences. And I think that the more you read about it, the more you become informed, I think the better you'll feel. I certainly felt better with the research that I did. So research near-death experiences, research death and dying. And I think that you'll find that it's not as scary, especially now because we have the means to make it comfortable as you would imagine. So I think we live in a wonderful age where death does not have to be painful. We can help control, we can provide comfort. And that's what hospice is all about with my husband, providing him comfort. He was comfortable the whole time. He was comfortable the whole time. And when he was gone, it was very quick and sudden, and he was just gone, didn't seem to experience any pain at all. I was so grateful. And again, Great Britain, thank you, Great Britain, for all the work you've done in the hospice movement. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped me, and again, if you're listening to this, it might be something that you would consider, there's an organization called Cruise Bereavement Counselling in the UK. And to begin with, I wasn't sure about it, but I needed somewhere because my family around me, I needed somewhere to talk that I could just let everything out that I was feeling. And that was so powerful. And it helped me to understand that I shouldn't feel guilty about the pain I was going through. I shouldn't feel that it was wrong and that I should be able to shake it off, because this was a very deep relationship I'd had. And they just helped me to see that life still carried on around it. There's still a hole there, to be honest. I'm sure there is for you with your son, with your husband, and so on. There's always going to be a hole there because they were a real big part of our lives. But actually, life has moved on around it. And what's amazed me, and I'd love to know whether this has happened for you, but what's amazed me is the number of times somebody has started telling me something about a loss. And then they've said, I have no idea why I'm telling you this. And I'm sitting there thinking, I know
Yes.
why you're telling me this. And it is a very much a sort of healing process when you begin to help other people, isn't there, for when they're going through it too.
I was so fortunate because two days after my husband died, a dear friend called, and she was 85 years old and still married. Her husband was still alive. He was 87. And she said, Kim, all of my friends are becoming widows, and they're just becoming widows all around me. And because, the men kind of tend to go first. And I decided I wanted to do a widows ministry. I felt called to do widows ministry. And next week we're meeting for a widow support group. Do you want to join? And I'm like, yes, sign me up. And that's been so comforting to be able to, and it's 4 years ago, we still meet. It's so comforting to be with people going through the same thing because you don't really get it until you go through it. And one of the things that really helped me when it came to healing was after my son died a year or so later, then I lost as a dentist, and I had nerve damage to my drilling fingers and had to give that up. And I was a primary breadwinner because my husband was sick. So it was a difficult time again. And so I thought, well, I got some time on my hands. So I became a grief counselor and I studied grief. And one of the things that just hit me was Worden's, Wordens, Worden's tasks of mourning. It's not, we're familiar with the stages of grief, but not as many are familiar with the tasks of mourning, because I like tasks. I like to say, okay, I can work through, okay, this is step one, step two, step three. The first step, of course, is accepting the loss. And when you have a traumatic loss, it takes a while. When you wake up, it's like, oh my gosh, this nightmare is reality. You have to accept it. It's a hard process to just accept it happen. Then it's processing the grief, which is really the hard part. You have to process it. I wanted so much to just go to sleep like Rip Van Winkle and wake up in 20 years and say, okay, I'm better now, but you can't. You have to process the grief, and it's hard and it's painful. And sometimes it takes years and you have to fight and work your way out of it. It just doesn't happen by itself. It's a task. And then the third part is going to come to terms with the new reality. And then the fourth part, which I like, is finding the time when you can live your life clearly without that shroud of grief over you and have that special spot in your heart for your loved one. So you have that place where I can now talk about my son and my husband and my mother, and I can laugh with my children. I talk to my grandchildren about them. One of my grandchildren is named after my son, so we tell stories. So I'm able to do that now. I couldn't do that for a number of years, but it takes work. And I think that's another thing to realize, that grief is work. You have to
Mm.
work your way out. Don't, if you give in, you'll stay under the bed the rest of your life. And we all know people that could not overcome the grief that they've suffered. I had a cousin who lost his brother about the same age we lost Eric. And right after Eric died, he came up to me wagging his finger in my face and said, "Don't you ever let your remaining children feel that they aren't enough." And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, because he felt he lost his parents at the same time as he lost his brother. And that actually is a normal place to go. I could have gone there in a heartbeat, but because he said that, and only he could say that to me, that gave me the motivation to like scrape and fight my way out of that grief pit.
It's a powerful, really word that he spoke. And I know I grew up with a girl who was my age at school, and she had lost her younger sister to leukemia. And, her parents, they just didn't cope with it. And so she felt forever in her sister's shadow, and never really could achieve her full potential because she felt guilty for still being alive. And if you're listening to us and any of the things that we've touched on are touching you, if there's something going on inside of you and you're saying, yeah, I've been there, or I know that feeling, then don't stay there, because the truth is, staying there and leaving it festering underneath is never going to help you to find the freedom from it. And there are ways out. There are ways out. There are ways to get the help and support that you need. So how can people find your book? Where can they buy it from? Because I'm just listening to you talking about it, I can happily recommend it. So where are they going to be able to get this book from?
You can get it on Amazon, and I actually have a UK link where you can buy it in pounds even. I can send that link to you. And if you go to my website, drkimberlyharms.com, there's a link right there to get it to. But I'll send you the UK. I have a link for the UK and also for Australia. So I'll send you those links so that
Brilliant.
you, wherever you are. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to talk to people. And if there's, again, anybody out there that's suffering grief, please, please, please fight, 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 because it's so much better on the other side. It's so much better for not only you, but for your whole family, if you can live in joy rather than in that fear and grief.
My mum is 98 now, and when my brother died, it was probably about, I don't know, 6 months later. I was sitting with my mum and I was crying. I was just really struggling. And she just said to me, "You know what, Angela?" She said, "Would you rather have not had the 47 years you had with your brother, if that meant you didn't have the grief? Would you rather have given up those 47 years?" And of course, the answer was no. Of course, it was no. I would never have given up those 47 years. And that kind of helped me to sort of move a little bit closer to the acceptance. I think that's where I was at that point. I still hadn't really accepted it. So, like you've said, Kim, it is a process. It's not a simple click your fingers. I recognize that. If only I could just wake up and it would be on the other side. It isn't. It's a journey to go through, but there's rewards from going through it and getting to the other side. What would you say, just as we finish, Kim, just to really encourage those who are listening and perhaps are in the place of still struggling to get through it? What would you say is your greatest joy now, with all the work and the research and the processes that you've gone through looking at death and grief? What would you say is your biggest joy now?
I think my joy now is just in the very simple things of life. I happen to have 6 grandchildren. That's wonderful. Not everybody has grandchildren, but the people, my friends that I have, my friends who understand me, being with my peers, joy comes from just simple living in interaction with other people and showing other people love. And I think our job on earth is just to, especially someone like me who's a little older, is just to help, especially those young people, move through life and realize that even if they have a tough time, even if they go through terrible times, they can come out on the other side. And when you're helping other people to learn that, that brings you great joy. I mean, that's the amazing part. It gives back, because when you give joy to other people, the joy comes right back to you. So my greatest joy is just simple living my life with my family, simple living my life with my friends, and trying to bring joy to people, because it pays, the joy comes back in droves.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. Thank you ever so much for talking to me today. I'd love to talk another time as well. And if you're watching us and you do want to buy the book, I'd recommend it. We'll be sharing the link below. If you've got a story, by the way, for yourself where there's been a life transformation, whether it's through something like Kim's been through, or it could be something different, then do get in touch, because we love to share stories that are transformational, stories that will help and support other people in this world, in this life, to find the joy that they need, and to move forward in their lives and experience the life that everybody should be able to experience. So thanks again, Kim, for coming along today.
Thank you so much, Angela.